Hello, and I'd like to welcome everybody to Windows 7 Migration, the Complete Picture. My name is Bob Crosley, and I'm on today with Don Jones. And we will go ahead and get started now. Just a little housekeeping to begin with. If you have questions, please use the questions panel on the WebEx control panel to submit your questions. Everybody's going to be on mute for the duration of the webinar. And we will be announcing the winner of the iPad just before the questions and answer session. So let's go ahead and get started. Don, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Don Jones. I am a senior partner and principal technologist for Concentrated Technology. We're an IT strategic consulting and education firm, and one of the things that I do is keep track of various markets and technology areas, Windows 7 migration being one of those. And we talk to a lot of different businesses of different sizes, and we talk to a lot of vendors that offer different solutions. And our job is just to try and figure out what sort of challenges customers are running into and what sort of solutions vendors are offering, and we try and find the middle place where everybody connects. And so one of the things I'll be doing here today is sharing some of the experiences that we've seen with some of our customers and business contacts who have been going through Windows 7 migrations.
Great. Thank you. My name is Bob Crosley. I'm in product management at ScriptLogic. I've been doing this for a while now in various client management and desktop management roles. And I'm going to be talking primarily about the products and offerings that ScriptLogic and Quest Software, our parent company, have to aid migration and streamline the process. For those of you who are not familiar with Script, in the year 2000, with a focus on 4 key areas: desktop management, help desk management, server management, and Active Directory management. We have about 30,000 plus customers worldwide, averaging anywhere from Fortune 100 customers to the smallest 10, 20-person shop. We're headquartered in Boca Raton, Florida. We were purchased by Quest Software in 2007, and we've been a wholly owned subsidiary since then. You probably have started to see things like at the beginning of this webinar, ScriptLogic is now Quest Software. We're completing our transition. And being part of Quest Software simply means that we're going to be able to offer more innovative products and opportunities to our customers. Don, do you want to start talking about the challenges with Windows 7 migration?
Yeah, so, obviously this is a time when every business is at least looking at a Windows 7 migration. You're either planning one, in the middle of one, or at least having the discussion on what you should be doing about it. And if it's not Windows 7, it might even be Windows 8. I know there's probably companies out there that are just going to hold off until maybe next year. So a lot of what we're going to talk about applies to both platforms. But sticking with Windows 7, because that's current, I think the last time most of us probably did a major migration was Windows XP, and back then we kind of had a really different approach to managing IT. We didn't have the same tools, we didn't have the same technologies, we didn't have a lot of the same approaches. So we've seen some customers be really successful turning a migration into a much broader opportunity. And what we're counseling some of our other customers on is to take this opportunity where you're already out there doing kind of a painful thing. You already have to touch every desktop in some fashion. And if you add just a little bit of extra work to that, you can really expand this into a much better thing for the overall team. You can establish new standards for your client computers, better standards even. If you do it right, you can really lower your ongoing costs and overhead. You don't have to manage Windows 7 the same way that you've always managed Windows XP. This is also a great opportunity to create massive user impact and downtime and to completely fail. So there's some caution that needs to be used as part of a migration. This is one of the biggest and riskiest and honestly most challenging and complex projects that a lot of IT teams will ever deal with. And so there is an opportunity to succeed, but you really do have to be very careful. On the next slide, what we'll do is kind of break things down into 3 phases. I think everybody sort of does this mentally, at least into 2 phases. We tend to think about the pre-migration planning, where we try to make sure we have all of our T's crossed and all of our I's dotted so that nothing goes wrong during the next phase, which is the actual migration. But what I find a lot of organizations aren't paying much attention to is post-migration. I think everybody just gets so relieved when they finally hit the end of the migration that nothing horrible went wrong and the world didn't come to an end, that they forget there's actually a little bit more beyond that. And so that's that third phase that we'll hit. So let's jump right in and talk about some of the opportunities on the pre-migration planning side. Obviously, one of the biggest things that I think folks have to deal with, and we all know this, is figuring out what applications need to be migrated, and finding out what applications are going to be compatible with Windows 7 and what's not. Now, in terms of just what you can do natively with the product, what we typically see people doing is inventorying software through the registry or through Windows management instrumentation. And there's a link here that can provide you with some access to scripts and tools and techniques and things for doing that. There's some downsides to this, obviously. One of the things we've run across is when you're pulling things out with WMI, you're not necessarily getting everything that's on the system because it kind of depends on how things were installed as to whether they'll show up that way. And if you're scanning through the registry, it gets to be a really manual process in sort of programming your script to detect all the software. There's a few other things you can miss, and one of the things that we've noticed a few customers struggling with is, more and more software comes in these suites these days, like Office. There's Adobe suites, and everybody wants to sell you a suite. And sometimes these inventory techniques can be a little bit tricky at determining or discerning between standalone software installations and suite software installations. And it kind of does matter from a compatibility standpoint, so just kind of keep that in mind, because the difficult and incredibly time-consuming part of this is figuring out which bits of software are or are not compatible. The way most folks do it is you kind of just have to sit down with a Windows 7 machine, install everything, run through all the applications, and see what works. Sometimes you can also dig into some vendor data sheets maybe on their websites and find out if they made a statement about compatibility. A lot of vendors will tell you that a certain version is compatible and a certain version isn't. And so long as you've got the version that is, then you're good. So there's just not a lot of extra resources out there. And we will talk more about application compatibility and resources in just a bit. But the point here is, your major area for avoiding risk is to make sure you know every single app that's going to be running on Windows 7, and you've figured out every single compatibility issue that might crop up so that you don't run into those things during the migration. Now, on the next slide, I do have a few resources for app readiness. One of the first things you can check is the Windows 7 Compatibility Center. Gave you a URL for that. That lists, I'm not going to call it comprehensive. For the first-tier vendor software applications, you should be able to find a lot of them there, and that will tell you what version is compatible. Obviously, testing. And Microsoft offers an application compatibility toolkit so that you can identify compatibility issues and possibly develop the shins necessary to make those applications compatible with Windows 7. And of course, if that doesn't work, your last and best hope is XP mode. That's not a perfect solution. It obviously requires a little bit more power on the client computer because this is just running virtual PC. And you shouldn't view it as a permanent solution without really thinking about it. Today, I guess Microsoft announced that they're extending XP's support into 2014. So that's going to give us another year of life behind XP. But, at some point, the OS is going to go away, and you need to decide if your company is comfortable running a completely outdated OS. Obviously, the point of a migration is to migrate. So if you're migrating but still running a lot of apps on XP, then it's kind of a failure. It's a good interim patched solution, but, it's not something I think you want to stick with forever. Bob, I know you guys have some things that you offer in terms of resources for application readiness and testing too, right?
Absolutely. We have a couple of solutions that I'm going to talk about today. When you look at the application readiness, you've got two particular aspects that you have to worry about. You have to worry about, first off, finding everything you're going to be migrating. Now, this is, as Don indicated, you can find things, for example, scanning the registry, WMI. We offer a product called Asset Manager. Unfortunately, my offering to the demo gods this morning was apparently insufficient, and my Asset Manager installation is not going to be available for the demo, but I'm going to show you some other things. But the thing with Asset Manager that I really want to touch on is it does a number of things. It scans with a very lightweight client on every desktop. It scans add remove programs, WMI, searches for executables, and searches the registry. Consolidates all of that. It consolidates all of that information and then runs it against our exclusive software package ID identification database, SPID, and that has over 300,000 applications in it right now. We're adding 4,000 to 5,000 applications a month. Automatically identify your applications. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because the first thing you have to do is identify everything. The second thing you have to do is rationalize the applications. And what I mean by that is if you went ahead and looked at 10 different machines that add remove programs, you would probably find 10 different versions of Adobe Reader. It might be 901, 902, 903, but it's all going to show as different versions. I talked to a customer about a week ago, 20,000 plus desktops. They used their traditional desktop management system to get a list of every application in their system. They found 15,000 applications. Now, a handful of those they could just kind of throw out. They were things they didn't have to worry about officially supporting iTunes so people could put stuff on their iPhones, that sort of thing. But the bulk of them were slightly different versions of the same software package, slightly different versions of suites. Some were perhaps Office Professional, some were Office Standard, and because when they went through a completely manual process to rationalize that down and say, what do we really have to focus on? How many applications do we really have? And that 15,000 applications rationalized down into just 1,000. Now, that took several teams a lot of effort to go through and look at all of that, each application by application, and determine how they all rolled up. Asset Manager does that roll up automatically. And so it can really, in this case, it would have literally shaved weeks of several teams' efforts off the rationalization process. Now, once you have everything, what do you need to do next? Well, the next thing you need to do, as Don indicated, is test for compatibility. Now, testing for compatibility means that you are going to have to, as he said, one option is to sit down in front of a machine and run through everything. Another option would be to look, for example, at a product like ChangeBase. Let me jump over to my server here. And what you're seeing here is Quest ChangeBase. ChangeBase is a new product for us. It is a automated application compatibility testing suite. Additionally, it can do remediation. You don't have to search for shims. You don't have to create shims. You don't have to search for updates. For a lot of things here, ChangeBase can automatically create a transform file that you apply with the MSI file when you deploy it in order to automatically remediate any problems. And let me kind of show you a little of this. What we have here in the ChangeBase UI is in the top half, we have all of the tests we want to run against. You see we can run against 64-bit. We can run against Windows 7, Server 2008. We can test against Office 2010, Office 2007. There's a number of tests here available. In the lower half, you'll see just a handful of packages. And near each package, you will see some information indicators. One is showing that any dependencies have already been loaded. Another is showing whether or not there's fixes available. And then over here, you'll see some indicators, a red number 9, an amber number 62. Down here, for example, for the Domain Statistics Wizard, you see a green check. Now, what does all of this mean? Well, let's take a look at a report. And very simply, you load in, import all of your packages. Say, you found 500 applications. So you go through and you load in those 500 applications, and then you run the compatibility test. And literally, this is what you get. You can see here, for example, the Domain Statistics Wizard, it's green across the board. Group Policy Management Console, on the other hand, is green for Windows 64, but it's amber for both Windows 7 and Server 2008. Now, what does that mean? That means when it is amber, that means that ChangeBase can actually create an automated fix for those problems. So you can, let's say this is an internally developed application, or it's an application from a vendor that's no longer available that you still need to keep and support in your environment. You can go ahead and in these situations, you can create an automatic fix. You can also create, it can also assist in app virtualization. A lot of organizations are taking the opportunity with a Win 7 migration to look at things like AppV or XenApp. And ChangeBase can actually hook in and prepare those packages for virtualization. Now, what happens if you have an application, for example, it doesn't, you can't fix automatically? You need to take it back to, say, one of your repackagers, or you need to take it back to a developer and say, this is the problem. Well, we can actually show you that. And you can see here, for example, the Win 2000 administration tools, which show as red. It will tell you in detail exactly everything that's in that application that's causing a problem. In your amber applications, you'll see we have a legacy help file format that's very common with Windows 7 applications, and we can remediate that automatically.
So that is so cool. I want to jump in real quick and tell you something.
Yeah.
We just finished working with a customer that went through this entire process on their own. And, you were talking about rationalizing the application. They measured very precisely. It took them 2,000 man-hours to rationalize that list. But this piece, coming up with the shims and the fixes and the transforms, as well as digging into applications and figuring out, I'm looking at their email. They spent 5,000 man-hours going through this process. That's roughly the equivalent of 2.5 years of effort for one person. So they had a number of different people just doing nothing but this, which it has got to be the most boring thing in the world. This is the first time I'm seeing this product. So it's really, really cool. I wish they had had that.
Yeah, thank you, Don. We're very excited about this technology. We think it's going to really streamline application migration for a lot of our customers. Let's go ahead and jump back in here. We're going to show you some more things a little later. But I'm going to hand it back to you, Don.
Yeah, so once you've gotten all of your applications figured out, you know what you've got, you know what the issues are, you're prepared to fix the issues. So, in other words, hopefully there are no surprises. You're ready to start the migration. And usually the first step in starting the migration is creating your OS images. Now, regardless of how you're doing that, whether you're using Microsoft's tools for this or third-party tools, please consider not putting all of your applications onto the base image itself. I know, I go way, way back in the IT industry, and I know what Ghost is, and I know what the value of Ghost is, but it pains me to see organizations have people dedicated to doing nothing almost, but continually rebuilding the organization's client images because there's a new version of an app, or they have to fix something, or there's a service pack. The idea of a standard is always a moving target in an organization. You never have a static standard. Things are never going to stay the same. Look back at the decade or so that you've been using Windows XP, and you will very clearly see that there is no standard except non-standardization. We throw something out there, and it almost immediately changes. So please consider not putting your applications onto that base image. Instead, on the next slide, too, there's some more URLs, and I want to point out that there will be a follow-up email that has all of these links, so you don't have to jot these down right now. So, get your OS image out there as an OS image, and then package your applications for deployment. You can create no interaction installers. There's a URL with some resources for you so that you can deploy these things without users having to click buttons. Keeping in mind that some applications, especially older ones, may still have to be run under elevated privileges, which is something that you'll have to build into your packaging. Your installation configuration typically has to be consistent when you do this. In other words, if you're going to package something for a silent install and you push it out, everybody's going to get the same one. So if you want to do multiple different variations of an installation for an app, then you'll have to package it multiple different times and manage those different packages. Also keep usability issues in mind. There's a lot of permission changes that have come along in Windows, in Vista, in Windows 7. Applications will frequently install just fine because you install them under elevated privileges, but they don't run just fine. So there's a lot of testing and tweaking that often has to go on there. There's also tweaks to things like roaming profiles in your organization. You might have to tweak an application so that it properly recognizes the right bits of your profile. Things like mapped printers and drives. If you've got older applications that require a mapped printer or a mapped drive instead of being able to use a UNC, those always takes a little bit of tweaking. Whenever you need to fix something like that, as much as possible, implement that fix centrally so that if the fix itself ever needs to change, or if you stop using that application and the fix can be retracted from the environment, then you can do it in relatively fewer places. On the next slide, one of the next steps you'll take once you sort of get that image out there is needing to migrate your users' settings. And this is a good opportunity to think about re-standardizing those too. I know a lot of companies, when they pushed out XP, and periodically since then, have sat down and figured out this is what we want our environment to look like. We want this wallpaper. We need this log-on message when the user logs on. And so one of the tools Microsoft gives you to bring that stuff over is the USMT, User State Migration Tool. It's a command line tool. It's really the same technology as the File and Settings Transfer Wizard that you can get to from within Windows just as an end user, but it's a little fancier. It definitely has a lot more in the way of automation, at least. It does not migrate everything. So you're going to have to do some testing to figure out what it misses, but it does migrate more than nothing. So it is a resource. Customizing this can be a fairly tedious task. I had never had to sit down and customize this. A few weeks ago, I was with a customer who had a fairly substantially customized USMT script, and it's a lot of work. And one of the things that they kind of clued me into was that they did not want to migrate everything. They did not want to just turn this tool on and let it go down its merry way, because they didn't want to grab all the old stuff from all the old computer that was no longer applicable. So USMT allows you to create these XML configuration files that are hideously complicated but extremely flexible, so you can tell it what to ignore and what not to do. As I was sitting there talking to them, I said, one of the things I think you might consider is not migrating the settings from machine to machine, because you're going to have to do that for every single user. Instead, figure out what your new standard is and deploy those settings centrally, like through a group policy object. Although there's obviously a lot of things that the GPO can't do still. So they were hacking things together in login scripts and everything else. But the idea was, instead of migrating user settings from old machines to new machines, centrally define the settings that you want and push them out. That way there's no setting migration process. And whenever you want to change those settings, you can do so centrally, provided it's something that you can fit into a GPO or cobble together into a login script or something like that. So Bob, I'll throw things back to you for the next bit. Bob, if you're there, you might be on mute.
Sorry, thanks. To touch on what Don was saying, there's a need in these situations. The better thing to do, rather than try to migrate the profiles, is to define those new standards centrally and push them out, GPOs or other tools. Now, we do offer a few tools here that I'd like to touch on as well. Let me go ahead and jump over to my demo server. Let me log back in. What you're looking at here is Desktop Authority. Desktop Authority, this is version 9.0, which will be released shortly. We have it available for some, we're testing it right now with some early adopters and getting ready to roll this out. For customers who are familiar with Desktop Authority, this is a completely new console, entirely web-based. But what I want to touch on for everybody is the sort of thing that Desktop Authority allows you to do that extends beyond, for example, group policy for configuring settings and such. Desktop Authority replaces login scripts and creates a profile. It can be multiple profiles, and they can inherit. So you can have child profiles and parent profiles. These profiles contain all of the settings that you want to use, and we can target them. So I'm going to show you a simple example here. If I take a look at a sample profile here, I'm going to take a look at a drive mapping. Now, if I want to create a drive mapping, I'll just create a simple mapping here. Assign it a letter. Now, the power in, this is just a drive mapping, and folks can see this sort of thing all the time. But where the power for Desktop Authority comes in is through our patented technology called validation logic. Validation logic lets you target based on over 40 different criteria, and you can use ands and ors to stack those criteria. So you can look at, if you look here at the first settings, you can apply this only, for example, this is part of your new Windows 7 standards. You can apply it strictly to Windows 7. You can apply it, do you want to apply it to physical machines as well as VMware, Microsoft, and Citrix virtual machines, x86, x64? You have a choice here of exactly what platforms are going to receive it. In addition to the platforms, let's take a look at some of the other rules available. I said there were over 40 criteria. And you can take a look at things like network membership, computer information like name, MAC address, IP address range, terminal services information if it's terminal service, create custom functions, set timing, time ranges. So if you take a look, it's very easy, for example, to assign a drive mapping to a specific group.
So when I have a customer that's put out a 2,000 line logon script, and they've got all these massive if constructs, everybody gets the login script, and then it runs through all this logic to figure out who gets in what group and everything else. This is basically just checkboxes, and it replaces all that.
Exactly. It's checkboxes, and it also does, the important thing to look at here when you look at this compared to some other tools is the profile, the validation logic rules are evaluated at the time that it runs. This is not a matter of, some other solutions out there create collections, for example, based on criteria when they scan the machine, and then they push a rule out to a collection. This is something that literally, if it runs on my machine and I'm a part of the marketing group this morning, I will get the marketing settings. And if tomorrow afternoon I start a new job over in HR, I'll get the HR settings the next time the profile runs. You can, with the ability to stack the profiles and the ability to assign validation logic to each element, we've had customers take that 2,000 line login script that's taking several minutes to run and shrink it down to a 15, 20 second process. Now, what this does for you, though, is it also does some other things that, I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. I want to show you something else. Oops. What this also does is, in addition to just settings and configuration, it allows me to do things like applications. I can both launch applications and I can push out MSI packages. Now, what does this do for you? Obviously, in a migration situation, it lets you, install those applications that you did not put into your base image. But on an ongoing basis, you literally have the ability to test for the presence of your mission-critical applications every time the profile runs, and you can define when it runs. And then if they're not there, reinstall them. Now, this means that if you have users out there, and a lot of us do, we have users out there that are running as admin, they may uninstall something they need. Desktop Authority is going to put that back for you automatically. Also, I can tell you from an example from personal experience, I had a hard drive failure. Physical failure of the hard drive. I had no way of really recovering it. So they put a new hard drive in. Our IT department installed the base image, handed me the machine, and all I did was log in. By logging in, that profile ran. When I logged in, it looked at all of my criteria. It checked for the presence of all those applications that had been defined as mandatory and simply reinstalled when they weren't there. Nobody had to go ahead and assign the new hard drive profile, or nobody had to go sit down and install a bunch of applications manually. I simply logged in the way I would any other morning. My profile ran. It saw that there were changes from the standard and put those changes back so that the system was returned to its standard state. Let's go ahead and go back over to the presentation and touch on a few more points here.
Yeah, so this is one of the, if you can picture me standing on a table in a conference room screaming and sort of pounding the air with my fist, this is the one thing I scream about a lot when I'm with customers. And everybody tends to think, okay, we've migrated, or at least we know how the migration is going to go. We're going to get apps in people's hands. We've figured out how to get their settings applied. Everything's going to work, and we're done. But that's not done. That's not over then. If we learned nothing from the XP era, it's that the deployment is just the beginning of a life cycle. There will be new applications. There will be service packs. There will be new versions of things. There will be new settings that you have to push out because some goofy law will come down the pike and make you reconfigure your machines to comply with it. There will be revisions to everything. Everything will change. But you've got a unique opportunity here. Keep in mind, most of us haven't done a major desktop deployment for years and years and years. You probably have got people you work with who have never done a major desktop deployment because the last one was when XP came out. So this is an opportunity to not only deploy Windows 7, but to do so in a way that supports ongoing management. Let's acknowledge the fact that there is no fixed standard. Let's embrace the fact that there will be changes and put tools in place now, as we're already out there touching everyone's desktops. Put the tools in place now to support those changes as they come down, to support the revisions and the new applications and the new versions. Put those things in place now so that in 10 years you can look at your desktop and go, yeah, you know what? That's still in pretty good shape. I'm still pretty happy with it because we've been able to manage it all along. And I know you don't have that now. I know everybody looks at their XP machines and they say, well, if I had to do it all over, I'd do it differently. And you've probably said that every 2 or 3 years that you've looked at those things because our rules and our needs change and we're constantly evolving. And it's difficult, it seems, to put the right tools in place so that evolution can be managed. But now is an opportunity to do that.
Thanks, Don. And, really can't stress that point enough. If you take a look, anybody who's been through a really rough patch Tuesday, who suddenly finds out something critical doesn't work, knows that that the process is ongoing. Things are going to come out. There's going to be service packs. You're going to have a user, for example. Every organization has the non-technical guy who thinks he's a tech guru and is going to go ahead and try to install Windows 8 or something that's latest and greatest. If you take a look at a product like the change-based product I showed, it's actually one of the few products on the market that lets you load in those patches and load in those service packs and test everything again just by clicking that test button against those new patches and service packs. And it gives you that ongoing peace of mind, knowing that everything is going to continue to stay functional and compatible and your phone's not going to start to ring. The other challenge that you have, and unfortunately this ties back to Asset Manager, I can't show it to you because of my server environment, but Asset Manager, with that rationalization of consolidating the applications, also allows you to track license usage. Now, what that means for you is you literally can do, tell Asset Manager, I have this many copies of Office Professional, and it will tell you how many you have in use and how many are available. And literally in use can mean more that is actually being used, not just installed. So for example, if I've installed There's a lot of expensive packages out there. Let's say Photoshop. Somebody said they need it. You installed it for them. They never used it. Happens all the time. Asset Manager can actually show you that's never been used. So the next time you get a request in for a Photoshop license, you can actually pull it from the machine that's never used it and redeploy it. And we find some of our customers have oftentimes can actually pay for Asset Manager simply in how over-licensed they are in Office, Visio, Photoshop, and expensive packages like that. Because nobody wants to face an audit, and nobody wants to come out on the wrong side of an audit, so our tendency is always to over-license, and Asset Manager can help rein that in. Now, there's a couple other things you have to worry about when you have your new standards. You've gotten everything taken care of. Everybody's migrated. Everybody has their shiny new Windows 7 machines. Now you have to keep them shiny and new. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a couple more things within Desktop Authority, and I want to show you something in an additional product called Privilege Authority that helps you manage admin rights. So if we take a look inside Desktop Authority, we have a security management section. There's a couple of different things within security management. There is our anti-malware deployment and configuration settings and our anti-malware scan schedules. Now what this lets us do is, it looks like I have a little bit of a licensing problem here. Again, I apologize for environmental issues. But what our antivirus, anti-malware feature, we've licensed an industry-leading antivirus engine, and you can define all of your antivirus and anti-malware scheduling and target it with that validation logic. So in my critical environments, let's say finance, where I'm very concerned about the possibility of keyloggers or other viruses, both potentially destroying information or intercepting information, I can set the strictest quarantine, the strictest scans, and do all of that automatically through validation logic. In other areas, I can possibly scan less often. I can set looser quarantine rules. I can give end users the option to decide what they want to do when they find certain severity threats. I can do all of that and, again, target it with that validation logic across those 40 different criteria. I can also have patch applications and deploy service packs through validation logic. Patching applications and operating systems handles all of your OS patches, all of your major Microsoft application patches, as well as dozens of third-party patches. So, the threats aren't all through Windows, obviously, or all through Internet Explorer. There's other ways that viruses and such can expose your systems, and the Desktop Authority patching system will help you lock all of that down. Now, the last area I want to touch on as far as a product goes is on the idea of local admin rights. Now, unfortunately, while the ability to tailor the rights available to applications has gotten better for software developers, not everybody pays attention. And oftentimes, applications require admin rights that probably shouldn't require them, but they do. I mean, I've talked to a number of customers who have told me that they have to have admin rights on most machines simply for things like the Java updater, the Adobe Reader updater, and the Flash updater. So you think about that from that perspective. To allow somebody to run a PDF and not have it crash when it tries to update, I actually have to run an end user as a local admin. Now that's crazy. So obviously the goal is going to be, let's lock that user down and then just elevate the things we need to do. And that's exactly what Privilege Authority does here. Now what I'm showing you is Privilege Authority Professional. There is also a Privilege Authority Community Edition, which is available for download from scriptlogic.com for free. It doesn't have all of the features, but it does allow you to play with the product and get a feel for it and deploy it into production. The real power with Privilege Authority comes in rules, and I can create a rule that allows me, for example, to run a specific application as an elevated user. So my user is running everything locally. They double-click the shortcut or they hit an entry point, let's say open a document, and that application is now actually going to automatically elevate and run under whatever credentials I give that specific application. But the real power comes from the privilege authority community. And what I'm showing you here is something called the rules exchange. The rules exchange allows you to create rules, share rules, and then use rules that other people have created. Import them into your system and use them in your environment. So, for example, I have a rule here to allow a user to run the disk defragger on XP. This has all of the information about the rules, the file paths, what settings, whether it applies to child processes, all of those things. I can then decide that I want to add a comment to it, import it, modify it, use it. I can do all of that. Additionally, rules I create, I can share out to the rest of the community. So this gives you a very easy way. And actually, the rules exchange is available to users of the community edition. So all of this is available to you as a free user. The rules exchange gives you that opportunity to use the things created by other people in terms of trying to solve some of these privilege elevation issues. Let me go ahead and give you some information about some of the resources we have to offer. Again, all of this information these links are going to go out in an email, as well as information about the recorded version of the webinar. We have, from scriptlogic.com, 30-day evaluations available for Asset Manager, which I talked about but couldn't show, the change-based application compatibility product, Desktop Authority, and Privilege Authority. The free community edition can at any point be converted into a 30-day evaluation of the professional edition, which adds some additional security features as well as the ability to target rules using validation logic, similar to what I showed you in Desktop Authority. A link to Don Jones' website, where you can get in touch with Don. Also, we offer our website, SMB IT Simplified. This is really vendor-agnostic information explaining to you how to do things with the tools that are already included with Windows or that are freely available, maybe PowerShell scripts, that sort of thing, to handle a lot of the management tasks that you're often struggling with manually. We have industry experts writing articles, providing video demos. You can access all of this information from scriptlogic.com/SMBIT. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and there's usually prizes and giveaways involved. So I encourage everybody to go ahead and sign up for that.